beauty queens, beauty kings, and all of my beauties in between. Welcome back to my channel. My name's Faith. We have another component meal prepping today. I am making sausages with jalapenos and pineapples, and I'll pair that with some rice. You won't see me make the rice because I got my 90-second rice again. Yeah, y'all know I do that. I'm also making a crispy chicken, and I have some asparagus that we'll chop up and put into the fridge so that's ready to go. I also have some baby potatoes. I'm gonna go ahead and make a stash of those. Those I'll probably pair with the chicken. I'll go ahead and make the chicken as a whole. We're gonna throw that into some buttermilk. To get started, preheat your oven to 445. That's what we're going to roast our chicken on. For today's story, we are getting into assault, murder, and Taco Bell. So hold tight to your chalupas. It's going to be a wild one.
Guys, this one's going to make your head spin. We are talking about the Taco Bell Strangler. Henry Louis Wallace, born November 4th, 1965, to Miss Lottie Mae Wallace in Barnwell, South Carolina. Henry's dad left when he found out that Lottie was pregnant. He was a school teacher. There's not a lot of information on him at all. Now, Lottie was strict. She was a hard worker, but she was said to have criticized Henry Louis for the smallest things. Now, Wallace graduated high school in 1983, and he ended up joining the Navy in 1985 after kind of bouncing back and forth between colleges. In 1987, he married his high school sweetheart, Moretta, and then he was honorably discharged in 1988, which was likely due to the fact that he started using drugs, including crack cocaine. That'll do it. So his first crimes began in Washington, where he ended up being served warrants for several burglaries within the area. And in January of 1988, Wallace actually was arrested for breaking into a hardware store. He pled guilty to the charge of second-degree burglary. Sorry, guys, I can't talk today. And after this, he was sentenced to 2 years of supervised probation. Wallace's first murder happened in 1990, and this was to 18-year-old Shauna Hawk of South Carolina. Her body had been dumped in a lake in Barnwell and was discovered weeks later. Now, Wallace had been questioned. Unfortunately, the police could never link Wallace to Shonda's murder. And at this time, things started to really decline for Wallace. His marriage to Moretta was ending. He was fired from his job at Sandoz Chemical Company. And then it was in November of 1991 that Wallace relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina. Lucky us. He began working at several fast food restaurants, and in May 1992, he committed his second murder. Sharon Nance was a 32-year-old convicted drug dealer and prostitute. And when she had demanded payment from Wallace for her services, Wallace beat her to death and then dumped her body by the railroad tracks, where she was found a few days later. Her sisters had filed a missing persons report, but we know how that goes when it involves a sex worker. Nance wasn't found until 2 years later in a wooded area in Charlotte. And I found that Wallace helped her sisters actually file that missing persons report, but I'm not sure what his relation was to them or if that's actually a fact. It's really weird if he did. His next victim was Miss Shauna Hawk, who he murdered and raped after visiting her in her home on February 19th of 1993. And he attended her funeral. What the actual fuck? Now, Hawk's mother founded Mothers of Murdered Offspring in March of 1993, and that's a support group in Charlotte for parents of murdered children. On June 22nd, this bitch is barely taking a breath. He raped and killed his Taco Bell co-worker and manager, Audrey Spain, by strangulation. Her body was found just 2 days later. Less than 2 months later, on August 10th, Wallace raped and strangled 21-year-old Valencia Jumper, who was a friend of his sister's. Wallace set Spain's body on fire to try to cover his tracks. The only time that I could find he actually tried to set a body on fire. And a few days after her murder, he and his sister attended Valencia's murder. What the fuck? Just a month later, on September 14th, he went to Michelle Stinson's apartment. Michelle was a struggling college student and a single mother of 2 sons, ages 1 and 3. I mean, this girl was hustling. She was trying to get it all done on her own. Stinson had actually been a friend, quote unquote, of Wallace's from Taco Bell. He raped her first, and then later he strangled and stabbed her in front of Stinson's 3-year-old little boy. Sick MFer. So that October, somehow Wallace had his first child. As far as who he actually had that child with, I couldn't find that information, and I couldn't find any information on that child, which they probably, obviously, we would want to keep that on the lowdown. On February 4th of 1995, 5 murders in, Wallace was arrested for shoplifting, but a connection hadn't been made between him and the murders. So they had this SOB, but they didn't know he'd murdered all these women. So just a few days later, on the 20th, Wallace raped, strangled, and killed Vanessa Littlemack, who was an acquaintance through his sister and a co-worker at Taco Bell. I mean, was there something in the food? Mac had 2 daughters, ages 7, and a 4-month-old baby girl at the time of her death. Not even a month later, March 8th of 1994, Wallace robbed, raped, and strangled Betty G. Bacom. Now, Betty worked with Wallace's girlfriend. She had a 3-year-old daughter. And after Wallace killed her, he stole some valuables and her car. He pawned the valuables, but he kept the car. Now, later, Wallace actually ended up going back to the same apartment complex where, in the same night, he murdered Brandy June Henderson and her son, Tyrese, by strangulation. Again, he took some valuables and he left. Now, after the police found these 2 young black women murdered at the same apartment complex, they ended up bumping up patrols on the East Charlotte side. And then on March 12, 1994, Wallace somehow managed to sneak past those patrols, and he ended up robbing, strangling, and stabbing Deborah Ann Slaughter, another co-worker of his girlfriend. And I don't know, but it sure sounds weird. Like, did his girlfriend have a beef with all of these women, or what was actually going on? Now, on March 12th, Slaughter's body was found, and Wallace was arrested on March 13th. I assume those increased patrols are what led to a quick turnaround at this point. Wallace confessed to the murders of 10 women and described in detail their appearances, how he raped and killed these women, and his pathetic addiction to cocaine. Like, that makes a difference to your stupidity. Over the next couple of years, Wallace's trial faced delays over multiple impacts, which included jury selection and DNA evidence. And his trial finally started on September 1996, where the prosecutor heavily argued for the death penalty. On January 7th, 1997, Wallace was found guilty to 9 murders, and on January 29th, he was sentenced to 9 death sentences. Stupidest thing. So on June 5th, 1998, Wallace married a former prison nurse, Rebecca, I don't know how to say her last name, Torres, in a ceremony beside the execution chamber. What goes on through these people's minds? He's been convicted of killing 9 young women. Do you think he won't do the same to you? Due to appeals and how the legal system fails, here we are, more than 20 years later, and no execution date has been set for fucking Henry Wallace.